Malawi Brief.
Kafukufuku wa ngozi ya ndege yomwe inachitika ku Chikangawa wayambiranso, ndipo lero ayamba kufika kumaloku ndi adokani ngwira amene anali wamkulu wa National Intelligence Service NIS. Iwowa awuza komiti kuti ofesi yawo sinatenge nawo gawo pa zokonzekera za ulendo omwe achilima anayenda opita ku Mzuzu. Zambiri mu video.
Best to assist the committee in your investigation, Honorable Chair. Maybe just to mention that I may be a bit limited for a number of reasons. Number one, by the nature of intelligence, because when we talk about intelligence, we are simply talking about processed information. And the Chair, not to sound as if I'm lecturing to your committee, but maybe so that we understand each other. The National Intelligence Service mostly deals with national security information. And when you talk about national security, is I think three major subsectors. You made the defense, they protect the territorial integrity of this nation. You made the police, you are meeting the police, that is what we call public security. So the police, immigration, customs, prisons, those that interface with the public and handle things that directly affect the public. That is what we call public security. And state security is where the National Intelligence Service comes in to protect the integrity of the state as a machinery of governance that we as a nation of Malawi have and fought for. So my limitation basically is that by nature of the intelligence product, it belongs to the service. And details are very critical in intelligence. And you have rightly said, it is very dangerous to speculate. So my simple advice, maybe before I start, is it would actually be very helpful for my successor, who is the incumbent, because he is the custodian of all the intelligence from the time of Kamuzu. All that information is there. If something is lost, maybe it is lost. They can assist you very much. I'll try to assist as somebody who is outside the office. I don't have the grace that I can even call upon any of the officers that I worked with to help me here and there, because by the nature of the job, you have hundreds and hundreds of reports you are looking on a daily basis. Having said that, allow me to get to my submission, Honorable Chair. I've titled submission to the ad hoc committee on the Chikangawa plane crash inquiry. I hereby submit my testimony as per the summons to be a witness on my role as Director General and the National Intelligence Service on the late Vice President's flight on 10th June 2024. That is before the flight as well as after the wreckage of the incident was discovered, and any other information that may assist the committee in its inquiry as per the summons. Involvement before the flight. Honorable Chair, neither the NIS nor myself were involved in the preparations of or any other activity before the ill-fated flight. However, considering that it was the day the then State President, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Makassar Chakwera, was expected to depart for the African Export-Import Bank, AFREXIM, annual summit in the Bahamas, the officers, that is my officers at Kamuzu International Airport, reported that the Vice President had departed from Zuzu to attend the funeral of the late Raphael Kasambala, SC, who had passed on the 7th of June 2024. At around 11 a.m. or thereabouts, I got a call from our Kia station officer informing me that at the airport they had activated the Joint Aviation Operations Command Center involving all key stakeholders because they could not trace the whereabouts of the plane that had carried the late Vice President, Right Honorable Dr. Saulos Klaus Chirima. This was so because it had failed to reach Mzuzu on the scheduled flight and had not returned to Lilongwe either. Immediately, I called the then Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Ms. Colleen Zamba, to map the way forward. She advised that we immediately head to Kamuzu Palace to brief the President. Upon reaching the palace, I found her in the waiting room with the then Inspector General of Police, Mrs. Melini Olamu, and the then Commander of the Malawi Defense Force, General Valentino Piri. In the waiting lounge, we learned that through the Joint Operations Command activated at Kia, the search had commenced to trace the whereabouts of the plane by first contacting all the possible alternate airports and landing strips in the neighboring Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zambia, as well as some districts in the northern region like Kalonga and Likoma, and no one had seen the aircraft. The SPC briefed us that working together with the Secretary to the Vice President, Dr. Lucky Squese, they had shared the phone contact numbers of the people on board the aircraft with the cell phone service providers, that is Airtel and TNM, where one of the numbers, I believe belonging to the medical officer, had been picked by the tower at Leprai Malawi Limited in Chikangawa Forest. This was significant because prior to this, as per communications between the tower at Mzuzu Airport and the pilots, physical search teams were headed to Ekwendeni. The MDF commander called his officers directing that a team be deployed from Mzuzu to immediately head to Chikangawa to undertake the search and recovery operations. The IG and myself equally directed our formations from the northern region as well as our headquarters to deploy. By the time we went in to brief the President, even the Joint Operations Command reported they had started off to join the search and rescue operation on the ground. In the presidential briefing, we were also joined by the Executive Assistant to the then President, Mr. Sean Kampondeni, and Chief of Staff for State Residences, Mr. Prince Kapondangaga. The SPC and MDF Commander took lead in briefing the President on the developments as narrated above. The President immediately took decision that he was cancelling his trip to the Bahamas to lead the nation in the search and rescue operation. Search and recovery. The NIS deployed its teams that participated in the search and rescue operations. On the details, allow me to declare that the intelligence that we got at the time is very much in line with the narrations of other witnesses who have done so, particularly Mr. Joshua Varela, General Dr. Valentino Piri, and the serving military officers who have spoken on the same. A further detail worth of mention is that there were 5 teams in which our officers were included. Upon discovering the wreckage or the incident site, the military and police moved quickly to cordon off the place where other members of the rescue teams were instructed to stand further afield, which included NIS officers. However, the military were advised to allow Mr. Varela to join the military and police to get closer to the site, such that he was amongst the first to see the wreckage before any work was done by the officers. What I can further mention is a disturbing scenario on the reaction by some when Mr. Valera returned to join the other group, broken by what he had seen. One of the senior political leaders of Afford shouted, "This government wanted to kill my father, and now they have killed Chilima." This ignited similar cries by some women from his party and some from the UTM that the MCP had killed the late vice president. This was the root of conspiracy theories that only grew louder with time. The conspiracy theories were a very serious threat to national security, such that by the time the burial was taking place, the country was on fire. Some political parties even deployed people to Nchewu to meet chiefs and incite people with a narrative that the late Vice President Dr. Chilima was assassinated and that former President Chakwera should not be allowed to attend the funeral in the district. This led to a further loss of lives, where the convoy of vehicles carrying the body of the deceased Vice President was stoned at a number of places along the route because some youth who had allegedly been offered lots of money and loss of alcohol and money by some politicians thought former President Chakwera would be part of the convoy. The lives of Madam Mary Chirima, the children and other family members who were traveling with the body were actually under very serious threat of harm. In actual fact, a number of vehicles, including one of the MDF escort vehicles, were stoned and bent. Just to correct here, the one that was bent was not the MDF vehicle. The MDF vehicle was just stoned. On the day of burial, when the then president traveled to Nchewu for the funeral, government had to heavily deploy the military along the route to support the police, and still more violence erupted on the return journey. It would only be fair if accountability would be considered by way of further investigations on who incited these developments and for what purpose, so that it should never happen again. Systemic gaps that need urgent attention. Honorable Chair, the Chikangawa plane accident and its handling revealed a number of systemic gaps that need to be addressed. The other inquiry reports made recommendations, and the military have also made recommendations, most of which hinge on the apparent resource gaps and lack of standardized systems in handling serious accidents and national disasters. The national security sector is not properly organized, with legal institutional misalignments very pronounced. The security agencies mostly work in silos, and this shows on how they are legally established, with each having its own act of parliament. There is need to review the national security policy and enact the National Security Act. The National Security Act will be critical in operationalizing the national security policy, in that its provision will be legally binding, forcing the security agencies of government to work together in a structured and consistent manner, as opposed to how it is now, where their coordination depends on ad hoc arrangements and goodwill of the leadership of the agencies at the time. The NSA, that is the National Security Act, will establish the National Security Council, chaired by the President, with all the national security relevant ministers as members. The technical committee would normally consist of the heads of national security agencies. This technical committee normally has scheduled meetings that feed into council meetings as established by law. There are further subcommittees that devolve up to the district level, with the Act prescribing how often they meet and the nature of joint operations they may undertake. The National Security Council would normally take precedence in handling accidents like the one under scrutiny, Honorable Chair. Equally, all the major threats to national security, as well as disasters, including pandemics, threats of war, and others, are handled by the National Security Council through its structures for efficient and effective coordination. Systems are developed and consistently improved. In 2022, the Law Commission was engaged to champion the review of all national security legislation with the aim of developing the National Security Act in a most consultative manner as the main legally binding and extensively considered vehicle of national security coordination. This must be considered as a matter of utmost urgency if our nation is to stand strong among the community of nations. We may go further, as is the case with a lot of strong and progressive nations, to encourage every presidency to develop a national security strategy as a tool of identifying the main threats and weaknesses as we aim to extensively and actively exploit opportunities and leverage on our strengths in relation to the developmental agenda of each succeeding government. Resource mobilization and allocation to the different security agencies of government are normally informed by the national security strategy. Honorable Chair, thank you very much to you and your committee for your attention. This is my submission, Dokani Mkwindangwira. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dogani Ngwira, for your detailed response, more especially on the recommendations. We appreciate your advice. I'm sure members have questions to pose to you, so I'll open the floor to members. Members, the floor is open for any further questions. We start with Mayani.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing the people of the Zamayani to ask the former Director General of NIS. Chair, you will guide me or guide all of us where you feel maybe my question might be as you have presented it, whether it's too sensitive or you guide in the best way possible. I just wanted to know from his submission, he has highlighted to say when it comes to search, he had officers in 5 teams. I just wanted to know how many officers were deployed to each of those teams, and if at all NIS as mandated with their work, they knew how many teams were deployed apart from the 5 that he has highlighted. I want to engage him, so I'll be requiring his answers and then I'll involve. But at any time, Chair, you may intervene if you feel my question too sensitive or whatsoever. Thank you very much, Chair.
Sangwira?
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me answer this way, through you, Chair. The Office of the Director General is the first consumer of the intelligence product. For most of the operation, the Director General is not intimately involved in the details of operations as to the information that is being required here. The operation orders are deployed by the specific directors of the departments, or if it is a regional operation, the regional intelligence officers on the ground. So I would be lying if I say I can recall how many officers were deployed in each team, but I'm aware that at least in each team there were some officers from the NIS, because to that much I recall being briefed as much. And in terms of how many teams were there, as I indicated, Chair, in my preamble, I am basically trying to recall the little that I can recall from all that information. But if it is important information, it's information that is readily available in the service. But that how many teams were there, and these 5 teams, if I may recall, I think it's mostly on the first day, on the 10th, because as you may recall, the signal, it was the Leprai Tower that picked up the signal. The wreckage were discovered near another tower, the Ntungwa Tower. So this search was around the Leprai signal, mostly on the 10th, maybe without going too much into that. So I thought maybe if that suffices, Chair, you allow me to submit as such.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was asking those questions because what I wanted to understand is how covered were the teams with your officers. What is drawing my attention to the number of people and how the teams were set, Chair, I wanted to know if the NIS officials could actually help to find out who took the pictures and shared them on the social media, because that's one of the biggest concerns that the families had expressed. So the only source that we could try to find that information is from your office. So I'm trying to look at how were they circulated as a team? Because they are amongst a team of other officers. So if one person is against 50, you cannot see the other corner, what is happening and all that. So that was the basis of my question, to say to how many teams and how many officers were deployed in each team. Those were supposed to be my aim. But where I wanted to draw my attention is to say, how were they observing the activities there and reported them accordingly? Because now we still want to get an answer somehow to who took the pictures and then ended up sharing them, on sensitive pictures, and shared them on the social media. Because I know, Chair, by whatever other witnesses, we know that even when it involves post-mortem, there were other photos which were taken, which we haven't seen in the social media, meaning there was some discipline on the other aspect. But this team is what I'm trying to gather, because those details are what I'm concerned about. Then, Chair, my last one on this one, I just wanted to understand, because he has commented on the stoning of the convoy, and he has made some references. I just wanted to know, were your officers deployed in these hot spots? If you can confirm, if your officers were deployed in these hot spots, like busy trading centers, or where you are talking about that violence erupted, or did you gather that information later on by your officers, or your officers were eyewitnesses to whatever was happening there? That's my last submission, Chair, for the time being. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ngwira?
Thank you very much, Chair, and the member from Dezamayani. Chair, who took the pictures? My officers were in most of the team. I should say all the teams, if there was any team, because that is normally the trade craft, the modus operandi, what you call in the military language. These photos, if you may recall, especially on the second day of the search, a lot of people joined in. Of course, on the first day, there were people who joined, but there were not as many as... so by the time the wreckage was being discovered, there were a lot of people from different political parties, MCP, Afford, UTM, you know. Those are the ones that are pronounced in the reports that I remember. So to find out who took the pictures, information must be there within the service. Of course, hoping that the institutional memory is preserved within the service, because sometimes, you know, when our political transition, sometimes there's too many changes, you know, in our systems. But otherwise, that information is there. But if I may recall, to avoid speculation, one of the pictures, the early pictures, was from a member from the Alliance for Democracy party, you know, one of the team that was with one of the senior leaders, you know. So unfortunately, at the onset, when the wreckage had just been discovered, before the military took control, you know, of the scene, and naturally, these things had never happened in this country. So there were a lot of excitement, there were a lot of people broken, and people react in different ways. So basically, it's an unfortunate event, but that is what I say for now. But I think the service may be able to help. And then on the stoning of the convoy, yes, not without revealing much in terms of how we deploy. That is also another challenge. But basically, the information that I'm sharing here is what was gathered by the officers on the ground. So both on the day that the body was being taken to Nsheu, and both on the day of the burial. So we deploy together, the police, the military, and ourselves, if it's a joint operations. So maybe that is all I can say. Thank you, Chair.